The story introduces William Ashford, seated at a white-clothed table surrounded by a phalanx of stone-faced bodyguards. He is a man of ivory suits and iron wills, believing he has bought total security. The image of his pristine world is suddenly fractured by the sight of Hope Miller, a girl with a burlap sack and a torn shirt, charging through the perimeter with a look of pure, unadulterated terror that money can't buy. Before we continue, welcome to Brittany Stories. This is the home of powerful, emotional, and unforgettable stories, filled with drama, secrets, unexpected twists, and life-changing moments. Each story is crafted to entertain, inspire, and keep you thinking long after the video ends. If you love shocking reveals, hidden identities, billionaire secrets, and stories that touch the heart, you're in the right place. Like our videos if they move you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. William Ashford had learned early that sentiment was a luxury the wealthy couldn't afford. His father had taught him that before the old man died, penniless and bitter, clutching lottery tickets in a county hospital. William had been 17, standing at that bedside, and he'd made himself a promise. He would never be powerless again. 56 years later, he'd kept that promise with mathematical precision. His empire sprawled across 3 continents. Ashford Industries owned the buildings where people worked, the infrastructure that powered their cities, the very roads they drove on. He built it all from nothing. Well, almost nothing. A small inheritance from a distant uncle, leveraged ruthlessly into his first property acquisition, then another, each deal more aggressive than the last. But empires required maintenance. They required walls. Martinez had been with him for 12 years, selected personally after William's previous head of security made the mistake of taking a weekend off during a shareholder revolt. There were no weekends now. No days off. The 6-man detail rotated in 12-hour shifts, their lives synchronized to William's calendar with military precision. They swept every restaurant before he arrived. They vetted every waiter, every chef, every busboy. They sat at adjacent tables, stood by exits, monitored security feeds. They were the membrane between William Ashford and a world that would gladly tear him apart for his money, his influence, or simply because they could. The penthouse where he slept each night sat on the 47th floor, accessible only by private elevator with biometric scanning. The cars he rode in were armored. The phones he used were encrypted. His lawyers were vicious. His accountants were creative. His board of directors feared him more than they respected him, which was exactly how he preferred it. Women came and went, always beautiful, always temporary. They signed agreements before the first dinner. They understood the terms, his time, his rules, his exit strategy. Love was a complication he'd engineered out of his life somewhere between his second divorce and his first heart attack. He had everything a man could want. Everything except the one thing he'd sacrificed to get it all. The ability to trust another human being. Every handshake was a negotiation. Every smile hid calculation. Every friendship was transactional. He'd learned to see people as chess pieces. Some worth keeping, most worth sacrificing, all fundamentally predictable. That was his fortress. Not the bodyguards or the bulletproof glass or the offshore accounts. His real fortress was the ice-cold certainty that he understood exactly how the world worked. People wanted things. You gave them those things or you gave them consequences. Simple. Elegant. Utterly reliable. Until today. Until a ragged girl with wild eyes and impossible courage had shattered his fundamental equation by doing something William Ashford had never encountered in 6 decades of cutthroat business. She'd saved his life and asked for nothing in return. He stood in the plaza, staring at the dying dog, and felt the first crack in his fortress. Not in the walls. In the foundation itself. Because if this girl was telling the truth, and everything in his gut screamed that she was, then someone inside his perfect system had just tried to kill him. And William Ashford realized with cold, creeping horror that he had no idea who he could trust. 3 hours earlier, Hope Miller had been doing what she did every Tuesday afternoon. Digging through the dumpster behind Marcello's, the upscale Italian place that threw away more food in a day than she ate in a week. The burlap sack on her back held everything she owned: a blanket, a photograph of her parents before the accident, a paperback book so worn the pages fell out when she read it. She'd learned to move quietly, to time her visits between garbage pickups, to avoid the kitchen staff who'd chase her away if they caught her. She was reaching for a half-eaten bread basket when she heard the voices. Two men had stepped into the alley from the restaurant's side entrance, and something in their tone made Hope freeze. Not the usual kitchen banter. Something lower. Urgent. She ducked behind the dumpster, heart hammering, pressing herself against the grimy brick wall. "You're certain he'll order the arugula salad?" The first voice was smooth, educated, carrying the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. "Ashford is a creature of habit, but if he deviates, he always orders it." The second voice was rougher, anxious. "Tuesday lunch, same table, same meal. Like clockwork." Hope peered around the dumpster's edge. The well-dressed man wore a gray suit that probably cost more than a car. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of face that belonged in boardrooms and country clubs. He was holding something small, a vial, catching the afternoon light. "This is compound VX7, the man in gray said, turning the vial between his fingers like a sommelier admiring wine. "Derived from a particular species of cone snail. Untraceable, undetectable in standard toxicology. The victim experiences what appears to be a massive stroke. By the time the ambulance arrives, it's too late. The brain shuts down." Cling. Elegant. The chef, Hope could see his stained white uniform now, was sweating despite the cool air. "Mr. Reed, I don't know if I can. You owe $300,000 to some very impatient people in Atlantic City." Reed's voice never changed pitch, but something in it made Hope's skin crawl. "I'm offering you $500,000. Gosh. Untraceable. Enough to pay your debts and disappear to somewhere warm. All you have to do is add this to his salad dressing. 30 seconds of work. And if I say no? Then I make a phone call, and those Atlantic City gentlemen learn exactly where you'll be tonight." Reed smiled. It was the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "I'm told they prefer to collect debts in person. Something about sending messages." The chef's shoulders sagged. Hope watched him take the vial with trembling hands. "He'll be here at 1 o'clock, Reed continued. "Mix this into the balsamic reduction. All of it. Make sure it's distributed evenly. I'll be watching from across the plaza to ensure everything goes smoothly. If you try to warn anyone, if you deviate from the plan in any way, you won't live to regret it." Hope's breath caught. She knew who Ashford was. Everyone did. His face was on buildings and newspapers. A billionaire. Untouchable. And in 45 minutes he was going to die. Reed handed the chef an envelope, thick, heavy with cash, and walked away without another word. The chef stood there, staring at the vial in his palm, then trudged back into the kitchen like a man walking to his own execution. Hope remained frozen behind the dumpster for a long time after they left, her mind racing. She could run. She could pretend she'd never heard anything. The world didn't care about girls like her. Why should she care about billionaires like him? But then she thought of her father, who'd spent his last dollars taking her to the emergency room when she had pneumonia. Who'd believed that helping people mattered even when you had nothing. Hope Miller pulled her burlap sack tight and started running toward the plaza. Hope's fingers shook as she pointed at the plate. The arugula leaves glistened innocently under the afternoon sun, their peppery scent mixing with the balsamic reduction that had been drizzled so artfully across them. "That," she whispered, then louder, "that will kill you." William Ashford didn't move. His expression remained unreadable, but she could see him processing, calculating. Around them, the guards maintained their positions, hands near weapons, eyes scanning for additional threats. "You're claiming someone poisoned my lunch." His voice was measured, almost clinical. "Do you understand the severity of that accusation?" "I don't care about accusations." Hope's voice gained strength. "I care that you're about to die. The green leaves, they taste like death because they're covered in it." Martinez. William didn't look away from Hope. "How many people had access to this meal before it reached my table?" "Kitchen staff of 12, sir. 2 waiters. All vetted. All cleared." The lead guard's jaw tightened. "This girl is obviously—" "I'm not crazy." Hope's desperation flared. "There's a man. Tall gray suit. He paid the chef. I heard every word. He called it Compound VX7 and said it came from some kind of snail. Said you'd look like you had a stroke and nobody would ever know. William's eyes narrowed fractionally. That detail, the specificity of it, had registered. Where did you hear this conversation? Behind the dumpster. At Marcello's. 3 hours ago. Hope's words tumbled out faster now. The chef didn't want to do it, but he owes money, a lot of money, to people in Atlantic City. The man in gray gave him cash and that vial and told him to mix it in the balsamic. All of it. Make sure it's distributed evenly. She watched William's face. Still calculating. Still weighing probabilities. And why should I believe a street child who appears out of nowhere with a convenient story? But there was something in his tone now. Not dismissal. Testing. Because I have nothing to gain. Hope's voice cracked. Because I could have walked away. Because I'm standing here in front of your guards and your guns knowing you could have me arrested or worse. Because the man who paid for your murder is watching right now from that window. She pointed across the plaza. 3rd floor. He wanted to see it happen. Every head turned. Through the window, partially obscured by reflection, a figure stood motionless. William's gaze followed her finger, then snapped back to the plate. For the first time, Hope saw something flicker across his face. Not fear. Something colder. Recognition. What color was his suit? Gray. Expensive. He had silver hair and he smiled when he talked about killing you. Like it was just business. William Ashford went very still. When he spoke again, his voice could have frozen nitrogen. Raymond Reed. The name fell into the silence like a stone into deep water. Hope didn't know who that was, but she could see the effect on the guards. Stiffened spines. Exchanged glances. Whatever history existed between these men, it ran deep. Sir, if Reed is involved, Martinez started. Then this isn't just attempted murder. William pushed the plate away with deliberate slowness. This is a coup. He stood, his ivory suit catching the light, and looked down at Hope with something that might have been respect. You've either just saved my life or you're part of an elaborate scheme. His eyes bored into hers. Let's find out which. Behind them, unnoticed in the commotion, a scruffy terrier approached the table where a piece of arugula had fallen to the pavement. Elegant. The brain shuts down. Stop. The word tore from her throat before she could think. Don't touch it. Heads turned. The guards snapped to attention like a machine suddenly activated. She saw them move coordinated, professional, already calculating angles and threat levels. But she couldn't stop. Not now. Not when she was this close. A woman with a coffee cup jumped aside. A businessman shouted something angry. Hope didn't hear any of it. Her entire world had narrowed to that white-clothed table and the silver fork rising toward the billionaire's lips. The food, it's poison. Don't eat it. 2 guards broke formation, moving to intercept her. They were fast, far faster than she expected. One cut left, forcing her to veer right. The other positioned himself directly in her path, a wall of muscle and tactical gear. Hope didn't slow down. Couldn't. She'd come too far. She saw the billionaire's face clearly now, weathered, calculating, the face of someone who'd seen everything and been impressed by nothing. He was looking at her but not really seeing her. Just another disturbance. Another problem for his people to handle. The guard's hand clamped onto her arm like a vice. Her momentum carried her forward, nearly yanking her shoulder from its socket. She stumbled, feet tangling, but kept reaching. Please. Her voice cracked with desperation. The salad, I saw him put it in. Another guard moved to grab her other arm. She was trapped now, held between 2 men who could snap her in half without effort. But her free hand still stretched toward the table, fingers splayed, trembling with urgency. The lead guard's other hand went to his holster. Sir, stay down. That's when Hope's eyes locked with William Ashford's. She'd seen that look before in the mirror after her parents died. The look of someone who'd stopped expecting the world to surprise them. Who'd built walls so high that nothing real could get through anymore. But something in her desperation must have broken through because his hand, the one holding the fork, hesitated. The salad. Hope gasped, struggling against the iron grip. I saw him put it in. You'll be dead in 3 minutes if you eat that. The plaza had gone silent. Even the traffic seemed to hold its breath. William Ashford stared at her. Not through her, not past her, but at her. Really seeing her for the first time. Let her speak, he said quietly. The guard holding her didn't move. Sir, she's clearly disturbed. I said let her speak. William's voice cut like a blade wrapped in silk. The pressure on Hope's arms released. She nearly collapsed, catching herself on the edge of the table. Her whole body shook, from exertion, from fear, from the sudden realization that she'd actually done it. She'd reached him. Now she just had to make him believe her. And as she looked into those cold, calculating eyes, Hope realized that convincing a man who trusted no one might be the hardest thing she'd ever done. This young woman just saved my life, and I need to understand. The waiter appeared from nowhere, moving with practiced efficiency toward William's table. Young, dark-haired, with the kind of face that disappeared in crowds. But his eyes gave him away, wide, panicked, fixed on the salad plate with an intensity that didn't match his casual stride. Sir, let me clear that for you, he said, reaching for the plate. Martinez's hand shot out, catching the waiter's wrist mid-reach. Step back. I'm just doing my job. I said step back. Martinez's grip tightened. Now. The waiter's composure cracked. He glanced toward the kitchen entrance, then at the third-floor window, then back at the plate. Sweat beaded on his upper lip. Martinez, search him. William's voice carried absolute authority. They found it in his jacket pocket, a small spray bottle, the kind used for misting plants. The liquid inside caught the light with an oily sheen. What is this? Martinez demanded. The waiter's silence was enough. William stepped closer, his shadow falling across the trembling man. Reed sent you to destroy the evidence if something went wrong, didn't he? Spray this on the salad, contaminated beyond analysis. Make it look like a standard cleaning solution. I don't know what you're talking about. How much did he pay you? The waiter's jaw clenched. For a moment, Hope thought he might actually keep silent. Then his shoulders sagged. 10,000. Just to spray and dispose. That's all. I didn't know what was in the food, I swear. A woman's scream cut through his confession. The terrier lay on its side 20 feet away, body rigid, legs twitching in violent spasms. Foam gathered at its mouth. Its eyes rolled back, showing whites that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Hope's hand flew to her mouth. Around them, pedestrians backed away, parents pulling children close. A man with a phone was already calling 911. Martinez released the waiter and moved toward the dog, but Hope could see it was too late. The animal's convulsions slowed, then stopped. Its chest heaved once, twice, then went still. The plaza fell silent. William Ashford stared at the dead animal, then at the plate he'd been seconds from eating. His face had gone pale beneath his tan. Compound VX7, Hope whispered. He said 3 minutes. That dog ate it maybe 90 seconds ago. William's hand came up slowly, touching his throat as if feeling for a pulse he'd almost lost. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. Martinez. Get that plate to a lab. Get the dog to a veterinary pathologist. I want full toxicology on both within the hour. He turned to the waiter, who'd collapsed against the building wall. And get him to a secure location. He's going to tell us everything he knows about Raymond Reed's operation. Sir, we should move you. Not yet. William's eyes found Hope, who stood trembling, still gripping her burlap sack. Beckon, why? Hope tried to speak, but no words came. The reality of what she'd witnessed, what had almost happened, crashed over her like a wave. Her knees buckled. William caught her before she hit the ground, his strong hands steadying her shoulders. For a man who'd spent decades avoiding human contact, the gesture came surprisingly naturally. Easy, he said quietly. You're safe now. The hard part's over. But Hope knew better. She'd just made an enemy of a man who murdered people with expensive poisons and watched them die from office windows. The hard part was only beginning. The figure in the third-floor window moved. Martinez saw it first. Years of training had taught him to watch for the moment prey realized it had been spotted. Reed's silhouette jerked backward, disappearing into the darkness of the office space. He's running. Martinez's voice crackled through the team's earpieces. Parker, Chin, intercept the north stairwell. Rodriguez, cover the parking garage. Nobody leaves that building. 3 guards peeled away from the perimeter, moving with coordinated precision. Martinez stayed close to William, one hand on his shoulder, the other on his weapon. Sir, we need to get you to a secure location. No. William's voice cut like steel. I want Reed. Now. Sir, with respect, you're the target. Protocol dictates. Protocol can go to hell. William's eyes were fixed on that third-floor window. Raymond Reed just tried to murder me in broad daylight. If he escapes, he'll disappear into whatever hole he's been planning for months. This is our only chance. Martinez hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. Stay behind me. Don't argue. They moved as a unit toward the building entrance, Martinez leading, 2 guards flanking, William in the protected center. Hope found herself swept along in their wake, clutching her burlap sack, heart hammering. The lobby was marble and glass, eerily quiet. A receptionist looked up from her desk, startled by the armed men storming through. Which suite is on the 3rd floor, north side? Martinez demanded. That's Sterling Financial. But they moved out last month. It's been empty. Martinez was already at the elevator, but William grabbed his arm. Stairs. He'll trap us in the elevator. They took the stairs 3 at a time. Hope struggled to keep up, her worn sneakers slipping on polished concrete. Above them, a door slammed. Footsteps echoed, rapid and desperate. We've got him cornered, a voice crackled through Martinez's earpiece. 3rd floor fire exit, but Rodriguez has the ground level covered. They burst through the stairwell door into a corridor lined with vacant offices. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that seemed to move. The air smelled of dust and abandonment. At the corridor's end, Raymond Reed stood frozen, his back to the fire exit. His gray suit was immaculate, his silver hair perfectly styled, but his face betrayed him. Flushed, eyes darting, looking for an exit that didn't exist. Parker and Chin blocked the opposite end of the corridor, weapons drawn. Reed was boxed in. Raymond. William's voice echoed in the empty space. He stepped forward, ignoring Martinez's restraining hand. 30 years we've known each other. 30 years of board meetings and golf games and Christmas parties. And you try to poison me like I'm some kind of obstacle to be removed. Reed's composure returned by degrees. He straightened his tie, forced a smile that was all calculation. William, I think there's been a misunderstanding. A dog just died eating my lunch. A waiter in your employ is currently confessing everything. And you were watching from that window. William moved closer, his fury cold and controlled. The only misunderstanding is yours. You thought I'd be dead before I knew what hit me. You can't prove anything. Can't I? William's smile was terrible to behold. You've forgotten something crucial, Raymond. I built an empire on knowing when people lie. And right now, your face is telling me everything I need to know. Reed's hand moved toward his jacket pocket. Martinez's gun was out before Reed's fingers made contact. Don't. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Raymond Reed's shoulders sagged, and whatever fight he'd had left seemed to drain away. It was supposed to be clean, he said quietly. Just business. Nothing personal. Murder is always personal, William replied. Especially when it fails. The interrogation room at William's corporate headquarters was designed to intimidate. All glass and steel, cameras in every corner, the kind of place where lies went to die. Raymond Reed sat in handcuffs while lawyers and federal agents gathered like vultures. But William wasn't interested in Reed anymore. Not yet. He found Hope in the adjacent waiting room, still clutching her burlap sack like it was the only solid thing in a world gone mad. A paramedic was checking her vitals while she stared at nothing, shock settling in like frost. She's dehydrated and malnourished, the paramedic told William quietly. Probably hasn't eaten a proper meal in days. I'd recommend get her whatever she needs. William's tone left no room for discussion. And clear the room. When they were alone, William sat across from Hope, studying her properly for the first time. She was younger than he'd initially thought, 12, maybe 13. Her face was streaked with grime, her clothes held together more by hope than thread. But her eyes were old. Too old. "What's in the sack?" he asked gently. Hope's arms tightened around it. "Nothing valuable. Not to anyone else." "I'm not asking about value. I'm asking what's inside." For a long moment she didn't answer. Then, slowly she opened it. The first thing she pulled out was a photograph, edges worn soft from handling. A man and woman smiled from better days, him in a mechanic's uniform, her in a nurse's scrubs. Between them stood a younger Hope, gap-toothed and beaming. "My parents," she said quietly. "Before the accident. Dad worked at Jensen's Auto. Mom was at County General. They were good people." William recognized the weight in those past tense verbs. "What happened?" "Drunk driver. 2 years ago. Dad died instantly. Mom held on for 3 days." Hope's voice was mechanical, practiced, like she'd told this story too many times. "I was 10. No other family. Bounced through foster homes for a while, but I kept running away. Easier on the streets than with people who only wanted the check." She pulled out a threadbare blanket next, then a paperback, To Kill a Mockingbird, spine broken, pages loose. "Dad gave me this. Said it was about standing up even when you're scared." William felt something crack inside his carefully constructed walls. "Is that why you helped me? Because of what your father taught you?" Hope shrugged, but her eyes glistened. "I just thought, if I walked away and you died, I'd become the kind of person who could walk away from dying people. And that would mean everything Dad believed in was wrong." William Ashford had negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching. He'd destroyed competitors and built empires. But sitting across from this girl with her burlap sack of memories, he couldn't speak. "You thought I was a thief," Hope said. "It wasn't an accusation, just a statement." "I did." William's honesty felt like a confession. "Everyone in my world wants something. You learn to see people as threats or transactions." "What am I now?" William looked at the photograph again, at the mechanic and the nurse and their daughter who believed in doing the right thing even when it cost everything. He thought of his own father, dying poor and bitter. He thought of the fortress he'd built to avoid ever being powerless again. And he realized that true power wasn't about walls or weapons or wealth. It was about being brave enough to save someone you'd never met, knowing they'd probably never believe you. "Now," William's voice was rough, "now you're the person who taught me what I'd forgotten. That not everyone has a price. That sometimes people do the right thing simply because it's right." He stood, extending his hand. "Hope Miller, I owe you a debt I can never fully repay. But I'm going to spend however long it takes trying." Hope stared at his hand, then took it, her small fingers disappearing in his grip. "Does this mean I'm not in trouble?" William's laugh surprised them both. "Trouble? No. But you're definitely not going back to sleeping behind dumpsters." The federal courthouse was packed. Reporters jostled for position outside, cameras flashing like lightning. Inside courtroom 6B, Raymond Reed sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his silver hair dulled under fluorescent lights, his expensive lawyers arranged around him like a failing defensive line. William Ashford sat in the gallery wearing his ivory suit like armor. Beside him, Hope wore new clothes, a simple blue dress, her hair clean and braided, her face scrubbed until her real age finally showed. She looked terrified. "You don't have to do this," William whispered. "I have enough evidence to bury him without your testimony." "Yes, I do." Hope's voice was steady despite her trembling hands. "He needs to see that the girl he tried to have killed is the one who ends him." 3 weeks had passed since the plaza. 3 weeks of depositions and evidence gathering, of forensic reports confirming compound VX, 7 in the salad, of the waiter's confession leading to a paper trail of payments from Reed's offshore accounts. 3 weeks of William's legal team working around the clock to build an airtight case. But William had done more than just prepare for trial. Reed's business empire had been methodically dismantled. William had called in every favor, leveraged every connection, used every tool in his considerable arsenal. Reed's board of directors had voted him out within 48 hours. His assets were frozen pending investigation. His partners had fled like rats from a sinking ship. By the time the trial began, Raymond Reed had nothing left but his lawyers and his arrogance. The prosecution calls Hope Miller to the stand. Hope stood, her legs unsteady. William squeezed her shoulder once, a silent promise that he was there, that she wasn't alone. She walked to the witness stand with her head high, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor was gentle with her, leading her through the story step by step. The dumpster behind Marcello's. The conversation she'd overheard. Reed's cold description of the poison. The chef's coerced agreement. Hope's voice never wavered, even when Reed's lead attorney tried to shake her during cross-examination. Isn't it true, Miss Miller, that you've been living on the streets? That you have a history of surviving? Hope cut him off, her eyes finding Reed across the courtroom. I have a history of surviving. And I survived long enough to see what your client did. The attorney tried again. You admit you were behind a dumpster looking for food. Isn't it possible you misheard? I heard him describe how the poison would make Mr. Ashford's brain shut down. I heard him say it was untraceable. I heard him pay the chef $500,000 in cash. Hope leaned forward. I heard everything. And I remembered it all because I knew if I didn't, a man would die. The courtroom was silent. Reed's attorney sat down, defeated. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy, bribery, obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced him to 30 years without possibility of parole. As the bailiffs led Reed away in chains, he looked back one final time. His eyes found Hope in the gallery, and something flickered across his face. Not remorse. Recognition. The understanding that he'd been destroyed not by William's money or lawyers or influence, but by a 12-year-old girl with nothing to lose and everything to prove. Hope met his gaze without flinching. Outside the courthouse, William placed a hand on Hope's shoulder as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. How does it feel? One called out. Hope thought of her father, of his belief that doing the right thing mattered even when you had nothing. It feels like justice, she said simply. And for the first time in 2 years she smiled. The penthouse apartment looked different now. William had removed most of the glass and steel, replacing it with warmth. Wooden shelves lined the walls, filled with books. Soft rugs covered the cold marble floors. Pictures hung where abstract art had once dominated, including one photograph of a mechanic and a nurse with their gap-toothed daughter. Hope's bedroom was down the hall, painted the color of morning sky at her request. Her burlap sack sat on a shelf, preserved but no longer needed. She had real clothes now, a proper bed, more books than she could read in a year. But tonight, they ate together in the dining room, at a modest table that seated only 2. No bodyguards watched from the corners. No security detail monitored the perimeter. Martinez was outside the building, respecting the boundary William had finally learned to draw. There were still precautions, still protocols. But inside these walls, William had allowed himself something he'd thought impossible. He'd allowed himself a home. Hope pushed pasta around her plate, fork moving in practice circles. 6 months of regular meals had put color back in her cheeks, weight on her frame. She looked like a child again, not a survivor. You're quiet tonight, William observed. Something on your mind? I was just thinking. Hope set down her fork. About that day in the plaza. What would have happened if I hadn't been behind that dumpster? If I'd been anywhere else in the city? You'd be asking the wrong question. William leaned back in his chair. The question isn't what would have happened if you hadn't been there. It's what would have happened if you'd been there and walked away. I almost did. Hope's admission was quiet. For about 10 seconds I thought about just leaving. Nobody would have known. Nobody would have blamed me. But you didn't leave. No. She met his eyes. Because Dad always said that character is what you do when nobody's watching. William smiled. It came easier now, these expressions he'd thought he'd forgotten. Your father was a wise man. Wiser than most of the people I've done business with. Do you miss it? The business, I mean. The deals and the power and all that. William considered the question carefully. He'd stepped back from day-to-day operations of Ashford Industries after the trial, promoting competent people and actually trusting them to lead. He still attended board meetings, still made major decisions. But his priorities had shifted. I thought my life was about building an empire, he said finally. About accumulating enough wealth and power that I'd never be vulnerable again. But empires are cold places, Hope. They're fortresses designed to keep the world out. And now I understand that keeping the world out also means keeping life out. Keeping connection out. Keeping people like you out. He reached across the table, his weathered hand covering her small one. You saved my life that day. But you did more than that. You reminded me what life was for. Hope's eyes glistened. What's it for? It's for this. This moment. This table. This conversation with someone who matters more than any business deal I've ever made. His voice was rough with emotion. I built an empire, but I was living like a beggar. And you had nothing but that burlap sack, but you were the richest person in that plaza. I don't understand. You had something worth more than money. You had purpose, courage, the willingness to risk everything for a stranger. William squeezed her hand gently. I'd forgotten those things were even possible. They finished dinner in comfortable silence. Later, William helped Hope with homework, math problems that frustrated her, reading comprehension that didn't. When she finally headed to bed, she paused in the doorway. William. Yes. Thank you. For everything. For believing me. For taking me in. For, her voice caught, for being the family I thought I'd lost. William Ashford, who had once believed sentiment was a luxury he couldn't afford, found tears on his face. No, Hope, he said. Thank you. For showing me that the fortress I built was really a prison. And for giving me a reason to finally walk free. Thank you for watching Brittany Stories. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more powerful stories you won't forget. And please leave a comment. I would love to hear from you.